All right. I think we are recording.
All right, let's get started.
All right. This is me, Prabhat Garg, internal medicine, and Dr. Evan Liggette, some sort of surgery, general surgery.
Your favorite general surgeon.
He is my favorite general surgeon, and he might be the only general surgeon I know personally, but still my favorite.
I'll take it.
All right. All right. So today we're gonna try to discuss the book Outlive by Peter Attia and share our thoughts. Um, hopefully, kind of like a commentary, and hopefully someone will find it useful. We both read the book. It's been a little while, so you know it's possible we get some things wrong. So the book predominantly focusing on a mindset and kind of a loose recipe on how to live a very long and healthy life, which I imagine a lot of people would find a desirable goal. Um, but uh, it also talks about a lot of things that me and Evan have independently talked about, and we had similar ideas. But I think Peter Attia does a good job of putting a lot of those ideas on paper. It looks like he's also been thinking about the same things for a little longer, and has a lot of data that he works with, and I think actually has um, a lot of clients that are actually, have bought into the similar ideas like how to eat and exercise and live a long time. So, and a very healthy life, actually. So let's see. Chapter one is titled The Long Game from Fast Debt to Slow Debt. I don't know. Evan, do you remember anything particularly what the topic was there?
The only thing I remember really is the analogy that he was putting forth, which was the eggs falling from the top of the building. Catching the eggs, like he had this dream where eggs were falling from the sky or from being thrown from the top of a building, and he was trying to catch them. And no matter how fast he could be to try to catch the eggs, he couldn't catch them all. And but he, in his mind, the idea shouldn't be to try to catch all the eggs, but it should be to get the person up at the top of the building to stop throwing them, kind of thing. So how to
Rethink.
yeah, rethink how you go about um, taking on personal health. Should not be like medicine again, that kind of flows into medicine 2.0, medicine 3.0 that we'll talk about, but essentially don't try to catch the disease once it's already there. Try to prevent the disease from being thrown in the first place.
And that's going to be a lot of, I mean, that's basically what all of primary care is supposed to be in medicine. So any doctor you talk to is going to resonate with, prevention is key, and not just in medicine. I mean, any industry that has high cost. In medicine, you obviously have life costs. People could die. You can talk about Boeing, right? I mean, that's a very expensive industry, and everybody wishes, every time an airplane fails, that a lot of energy and thought was put in prevention. So everybody's going to agree that every bad outcome that can be prevented should be prevented, and a lot of thought and time and energy should be invested in trying to prevent it. So I think that's a great segment to chapter two, which is kind of medicine 3.0, rethinking medicine for the age of chronic disease. I think he talks about the same kind of stuff. Um, try to um, prevent harm and thinking about chronic disease again. You don't want to necessarily manage it, but try to get ahead of it where you can. And I'll skip around here. I'm just looking at the chapters list. How about okay? Let's jump to chapter four. I think that'll be more interesting. Uh, Centenarians. The older you get, the healthier you have been. Do you remember that chapter?
Vaguely, yeah. I mean, a little bit of that one.
Okay,
Uh,
so okay, tell me what you remember.
well, so he's basically asking what can we learn, and he starts the chapter off with the centenarians, like several centenarians that led what would seemingly be unhealthy lifestyles, right? They're smoking, they're drinking,
Yeah.
and yet they're living to 110 or more or less, and he, basically attributes that probably to good genes. There's something genetically about these individuals that allows them to live longer. But he's asking, is there something about them that we can apply to our lives and kind of hack the system to live, to be not only live longer, long as they are to be healthy in that old age as those examples were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's and he talks about like the blue zones. I think like these communities, I think in Greece and some of these European small cities, where yeah, or and also I think Japan. I think there's a Netflix documentary about a similar topic of these small communities of people who happen to be living healthily, like they're walking into their 90s and 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 absolutely, I mean, nobody can know for certain why. The obvious question is maybe it's genetics. You know, there are small communities. They're often isolated. Not a lot of new people are moving in there, and you know they've been living there for 100 years, and these are modern studies. So that means that they've been living in the same community since before World War I, and and it's hard to, well, maybe a little bit after World War I, but it's going to be hard to use hard science, which is, you know, we like double-blinded trials where we control everything, just so we can be highly certain of any signal that's coming out of these studies. But when we are looking at these large populations, we're trying to. It's going to be very unreasonable to do a double, you know, random trial, double-blind trial. But so so that's the thing. Either this is all about genetics, and if it's not genetics, it has to be the lifestyle. I mean, I don't know what else it could be. Other like it could be environment, but I think that would be part of the lifestyle. Um,
Right, and I
the,
think lifestyle also, includes the psychological portion, right? Like I think community and psychological health are going to be, and he kind of goes into that later in the book. But I think that from what I lived in Okinawa for a couple of years, they had one of the documentaries is the Okinawa Life on Netflix. They're talking
yeah,
about the community that these people have, and I think it's an interesting. I don't know that there's good, hard data on that kind of stuff, how that impacts longevity, but certainly you could imagine that it's going to affect the quality of your life in the long run.
but since you are somebody who, you know, wants to live a very long life, a very healthy life, what was your takeaway? I mean, do you think you can't really change genetics, and but do you think if you move to these communities, even at this age, do you think you'll probably live a longer life than if you continue to live, you know, in America?
No, what I gathered from it was, so I think he mentioned a twin study or he talked about something, but I have written down that he mentioned that genes account for 20% of lifespan. Essentially, they could, for whatever, if it was a twin study or whatever it was,
Hmm.
that you could say genes were accounting for 20% of the lifespan. And he says having centenarian parents is probably the best way to become a centenarian, or having centenarian siblings would be the next best way to becoming a centenarian, right? And you can't choose that. Um, but in my opinion, if I moved to a blue zone, that would not automatically make me live longer, right? I think you have to, and I think you can, and vice versa. The people that are living in blue zones, I think, could move wherever, as long as they kept, if they're the type of person that's going to live a long, healthy life, the mannerisms that they have, if they do them in the new place, they're gonna live that long, healthy life. So I think of here, I live in San Diego, and I think of a buddy I have here who works really, really hard to create a community of people to be around. I mean, if I compare it to my life, I'm kind of more of a um, say more lonely or just more. I kind of keep to myself. I don't make a really strong effort to develop. I mean, the friendships I have, I try to keep and maintain, but I don't get out there and try to meet new people and develop this huge community. That's something I see in him that is probably a good trait to have, and probably something that would be over the course of your lifetime important to adding to that psychological health. So, and then we could talk about other things too. I mean, exercise, diet. I don't know what there seem to be multiple diets that you could choose, but um, however you choose it, and he kind of says the same thing. Attia does is like we can't really get into the weeds of diet because there's not good data out there. But anyways, we can. I think that's another chapter. But all these things add up to how are you gonna? What are these changes or what are these things you're gonna implement into your life to help you stay healthy for longer? That's what I take away.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I mean, I've definitely taken care of patients who come from families where everybody lived into the high 90s and lived well. Um, and they all may not have by the book really good lifestyle. So I think genes have a huge factor to play here. I can put a number, but I mean, if he says it's probably the biggest factor, I think that's a very reasonably uh, put together argument. And the food again, I also agree with your takeaway. That's probably not that important, just because all the different communities that have been studied happen to have different variations, of different diets, and that just tells me I think human body is a miracle. I mean, most lives, most animals are just miracle in terms of how uh, they can take different nutritional sources and sustain themselves. I mean, the transformation, highly efficient way of getting calories from food, be it plants or meat, and turning into building blocks for your own body. I think I think it's people under appreciate how how cool it is, and only when you see a patient who doesn't have a working bowel system or working gut, maybe short gut or some sort of colon issue, only then you realize, I mean, how drastically life can be affected. So I agree that I don't. I think there are certainly some. I'm not saying eat whatever you want and it doesn't really matter. No, but if you're just eating sugar all day, it's probably you're probably doing a lot of harm to yourself. But if you're nitpicking between, am I gonna eat, is lean meat better than um, a different type of, fish better than chicken, and you're like spending hours trying to figure out the optimal way of consuming nutrition. Based on my experience, I don't think that you're going to uh, get a lot of signal from just trying to nitpick these two kind of things. So I think as long as generally healthy, or just avoid the absolute stupidity in your food, and I think you'll be fine. Uh, and but that's not really actionable. So what can you do if you don't have good genes and you generally eat right, and so do a lot of people, and you're avoiding the easy things to avoid, which is don't smoke, uh, maybe I think activity is probably the only thing, because I think a lot of these communities, people grew up before. I don't think they're rich communities. I don't think they're in their cars, or I think that a lot of mobility is involved. A lot of climbing stairs are involved. A lot of squatting and working in the field, at least in their younger age. A lot of people doing their own chores. So I don't see them having a lot of help. I think they're just independent and they don't work out, but their life is the workout. So I think they've incorporated a lot of exercise in their daily living, which I think is a great takeaway. And I think it's really the only actionable thing is to maintain independence of your body, is try to, you maybe don't use that elevator, and maybe keep that car parked. Maybe go, if you want to go to a grocery store, it's fine. Take a strong bag and just try walking a groceries 2 miles. I mean, listen to something on your way. I mean, that I think those things, if they become a big part of your lifestyle, I think you'll see. You may actually see much more sustainable benefit than going to gym 3 times a week. If you're just all the time, from when you wake up through when you go to bed, you're uh, incorporating these kind of exercise, almost like micro. It's like a play on microdosing with micro exercising throughout the day in your life. So I think that's the biggest key that I would feel that these people benefit from. Um, I'm showing you anything else. I think there's something to be said about the community. These are small communities where people know each other, I think, and which, if I were to go there, I would feel a lack of community because our lives are here. We live in the age of internet, but that is not to say you can't have a sense of community. I think isolation probably causes a lot of stress and unhappiness. Yeah, and I think happy people probably live longer. That's a complete. I don't have data to support that right now, but I can see why that would be true. I mean, especially even if it's not true. If you're gonna live 80 years, you want to live happy or you want to live miserable, or you want to live 80 happy years or 100 miserable years. So I
Right.
think just like live happy. I mean, other people make people happy, and good relationships are typically the only thing that probably matters at the end, other than maybe health. So I
Yeah,
think I agree with you
I
there.
think that my takeaway is that it takes, just like most things, is it takes work, right, to build a community. You know, we could have not had this conversation today and pushed it off another week and another week,
It's so
right?
easy
So
to
like,
do. So
right,
easy to
it's
do.
I think just being cognizant of that, and putting the effort in, just like with working out, just like with eating, with fostering those relationships, um, is important. That's kind of my personally, I mean, that's what, for me, is what I do pretty good with the workout stuff. I do pretty good with the diet stuff, but probably where I could improve is in that realm. And um, I think he had I can't remember who he had on his podcast one time, but he's like, guys are just notoriously bad at keeping relationships for a long period of time. Women tend to be a little bit better at it. And he's like, this guy said to me, what am I supposed to do? Go out and call up a friend and go have a dinner date? Like, what do you expect? He's like, yeah, call your friend and go have a dinner date. Like, like, put in the effort. Um, I think if you balance that, like for me, sometimes if I try to do that, I'll get to the point where I'm like, all right, enough socializing. I want to get back to doing something, something I have on my to-do
Productive.
list.
Yeah.
All right. And so I think it's this yin and yang. Like, if you don't do, if you're just too much focused on the to-do list, I really feel like your mental health suffers. And so you have to balance that, however that balance is for you.
I also think like these things shouldn't be difficult. 'Cause I think one of these communities, of the blue zone communities, I don't think these people are trying to live a healthy life. I think they're just trying to live the most average life for their community.
Right.
Like you could be the bottom of the barrel in that community, but you're still, you have to walk because you live on top of a hill, and maybe your work is at the bottom of the hill all your life, and you just had to. There's no other way, and and maybe technology wasn't there at that time. Automobiles weren't as popular. The roads were just too small. But you did what you did mindlessly, as mindlessly as today people go on social media. That was your mindless way of roaming around, and maybe your parents, that these people's parents probably thought they were wasting a lot of time. Maybe they want to go hang out with their friends. I'm sure. Like the point I'm trying to make is they. I don't think they could have been the bottom 5% of their peers and still done a great job, but because that was the standard in that community, and we could, if we could learn that, we would figure out a way of making good meals a standard thing, exercising a standard thing, and having community a standard thing that is as easy as turning on social media apps or Netflix.
Right. Yeah.
And I could probably do a better job because I think I don't know, what if we don't have these time sinks, that because I mean everybody has the same amount of time, and maybe one can argue in America in today's world maybe we are more productive, we are working longer, we are traveling more, we're looking for more elevated experiences, but but I I, I think we can still try to find, because it's very easy to not hang out, to not work out, to not cook, get food from outside. It is so easy to fall behind, because capitalism allows you the luxury. Like it gives you an easy way out if you have the money to not cook, or like what's the point of exercising? Because you could just sleep in and work more. So I think I totally agree with you that the community and all this stuff is just very important. But I need to be better about that. Like you, I don't think I cook and work out as much. But maybe I'm better than you at community. So,
Yeah.
so ha.
Doesn't get much worse than me. Yeah.
No, yeah,
Um,
it's like the life.
um, but yeah, so I think he basically, the gist of that chapter is, how can we, via our behaviors, reap the benefits of the centenarians, that they, whatever benefits they may be getting through their genes. It's interesting. They've done, it sounded like, I mean, I haven't looked at the research, but that they've done these genome-wide association studies on the centenarians, and they can't pinpoint particular genes,
There's
which is
gotta
interesting to
be,
me.
yeah. I mean, um, my gut feeling would be that it's not just a single gene mutation. Like
Well, not a
it's not
single gene, but just like something that you would see if you did a genome-wide association, like something's got to be lining up. You would think,
like an obvious
these
pattern. You know
these
what? I mean,
clusters are like, I don't
the
know.
good the good thing is the genome technology is getting easier and easier, and it at some point it's just a pattern recognition problem, and maybe with the AI system, maybe they'll find a solution pretty quickly. Can you still hear me? I think my AirPods are dying.
I can still hear
Okay, okay, good.
you.
So I'm hopeful. I think in the next 10 years, if not like maybe 20, I think we'll make a big breakthrough. But I don't know what that knowledge probably is a little scary for some to realize, because I don't know, like I mean you can easily go into eugenics type, you know, moral dilemmas of what to do with the knowledge. Like, do you get multiple embryos when you're trying to select for a child, and pick the ones that kind of score the highest on whatever test, whatever your scale is. It's going to be hard to say no. I mean, just if the a certain embryo has the potential of living a long time, a healthy lifestyle. And, you can go into even like superficial things. Like maybe they're taller and more beautiful, and their brain is more likely to be very smart. Well, I think society will be a
Yeah,
problem when they get there. Less likely to be have addiction issues. I mean, these are once that genie's out of the bottle, it's gonna be hard to go back.
yeah,
It's gonna stick.
yeah.
But
It's definitely it's just from a intervening at the embryo stage is probably the easiest, right? I mean, once you're kind of a developing organism, it's hard to deliver the goods to where you need to deliver them to, right?
yeah,
Um, but I agree. I think the level of technology with the gene sequencing and I think there's something, and with AI maybe, but something is I do think they've probably been saying that for a long time, like
no,
over
but I
10
mean
years.
the AI stuff has changed significantly. I think it's if if computers keep getting stronger and stronger at the current pace, I mean this will be a much manageable problem to just try to extract. Like you feed in these are all the people and their genomes, and these people live a really good life, a long life, don't get heart attacks, strokes, cancer, even with smoking. I mean, take an extreme example. And these are the people who do everything and, still get all these chronic diseases. I mean, I would even put money that in 20 years they will be able to narrow down a lot of, what sequences are involved. And 20 years is a long time. But, and the biggest downside of going down that pathway will be probably loss of diversity, in my opinion. Just, right now, we have the beauty of we have so many different types of people. If a weird virus were to infect humanity, chances are not all of us will die. Humanity is diversified in that sense with different types of people. And if we have a trend of us agreeing upon, well, one answer is the right answer, it will be a short-term win for people who enter this. But as a species, you become less resilient. We all become more and more of a clone of each other, and just the right attack from you know whatever it may be can be really bad for society. But you know
Yeah,
it'll be
interesting
it'll
thought.
be interesting.
Well, I mean, I think how can I guess it gets a little off topic, but like the whole like how do genes affect our lifespan? How do genes affect our health span? And if you can find the genes, I guess they don't even have the genes though, right? They don't even know what are the genes that are uh, responsible for helping us live
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just
healthy life.
genes, right? It's the problem is a lot more complex. Because first we used to think the central dogma, like the genes are very important, but now we know like genes are one thing. It's not the absolute genes, but it's like what genes exist, and what is the uh, setting. What are the other genes around it, and when you put all these genes uh, together with other genes, like ultimately, you can have same genes, but you could have proteins that come out that are different or different ratios. So that transcription and translation that happens to the gene. So ultimately, you're trying to figure out not just what genes, but what will the protein map look like for the zygote or embryo and all the cells. The gradients and stuff and the signaling pathways. So it can become I mean, it can become a lot more difficult and complicated, but I think it's still, at the end of the day, a computational problem that, if I'm correct in how strong these computers will be that can basically do these optimization I'm not even talking about quantum computers, just GPU based, like they're trying to solve very similar things. I mean, protein folding, that's what I think the AlphaGo that Google made is now working with all these biotech companies to find drug targets, in simulations, things that used to be done via a lot of trial before you go in. I mean, just like iterative trial, I think, on maybe on animal models. Now we're trying to just do that under a simulation, and the simulation environments will become more complex and more real and more relevant. So I think once we hit that threshold, that I think we'll get closer to the truth of what makes us live longer. We'll break the genetic code, not just from the genes point of view, but also from the protein point of view in 20 years. That'll be
Right.
my
I
bet.
think it's a good. I've never. I don't know that I've thought of it that way, in the sense that mapping the genome was such a huge thing, right?
Correct.
But it's such a, like you said, the genome is so complicated, right? You can't. It's not just you have. It's not all coding, right? And then just the simple one little piece, like you said, like how do we change this base and how does it affect protein folding? And so if that's the next realm, being able to see how does this affect the proteins that are produced and in what concentration and how does that lead to an effect? And if you can have a computer figure that out, like basically substitute bases in and know how it's going to fold and know the implications of that. I mean, that would be astounding.
I
Without
mean,
having to just like do an animal experiment. Right now, they probably with CRISPR or whatever, you probably have a way, because it like a sickle cell disease, right? This is
gotcha.
what is the I'm not really in that piece, but how do they cure this now, or what is the piece there with CRISPR?
So the sickle cell is, for people who don't know, it's a problem. It's actually a very small mutation, and we know where the mutation is. But this very small mutation causes the blood cells that should be round to be kind of these needle shaped, uh, and only under like stressful conditions, under low oxygen conditions, for example, they become sickle cells, and they can get clogged and stuck around the blood vessels that they're flowing and cause a lot of pain. And and obviously, kind of very much a lot of people from, like, I think sub-Saharan Africa will have these kind of things, these mutations, and we think evolutionary, this had protective effect from malaria that was also endemic in that region, because malaria parasite will affect red blood cells, and then sickle cell will just make all blood cells randomly prone to failure, and thereby just making it very hard for a malaria parasite to kind of embed itself. So when malaria decreases, now you have patients who are just struggling for no reason, and we know that the problem is so specific. Like, why can't we just and, just knock out that, just fix that coding sequence? And theoretically, we have known this can be done for 10, 20 plus years now. And it's really just changing one. We can send viruses. Some viruses can go in, like herpes virus. It goes in while you have a cold sore from a herpes virus, and there's a reason it comes back. People have recurrences. It's not like you're catching it again, but the herpes virus goes into your DNA and kind of makes a home there. It's part of that cell's DNA going forward. And then whenever there's a stressful event, it can trigger that gene that actually is for the herpes virus get activated, makes the proteins, travels up a huge neuron, and then presents itself. And then once it's done, it goes into hibernation, which just means the gene is inactive till the next time. So we know viruses have this ability to some viruses have the ability to go into the DNA and make changes. And once you know that, you can try to play with it uh, and try to edit genes, you know, in a therapeutic manner. So ideally for sickle cell, you will just fix that mutation. But what they actually do is instead of trying to fix the the abnormality with the normal, they actually add a new gene, I think, and I may be wrong, that actually is not the wild type, meaning the normal. So they don't restore the normal function, but they introduce a gene that actually creates fetal hemoglobin, which
Right.
is like
Right.
a protective. It's just kind of like the hemoglobin that the fetuses, the gene that the human fetus expresses, and as a normal fetus, grows up, that gene kind of shuts down. It's no longer in play. But we notice that people who have sickle disease, sometimes they're a subset of sickle disease patients who didn't have such bad flare ups of the sickle cell disease. And then we looked at their different types of hemoglobin. We saw, oh, this is all like, oh, a lot of them will have this kind of fetal hemoglobin, which was protective from sickling. So that's the way they go. And now their CRISPR is FDA approved in the US for sickle cell, and the trials going. We're doing some trials. So um, you know,
Are they taking marrow, bone marrow, and
I don't know if
editing the
it's
genes,
narrow.
or
It may just be peripheral, but yeah, they extract cells from the same person, take it to the lab, make some changes, and introduce it back into. But I think it is actually a bone marrow transplant, but it's just like a cell transplant. They take the bone marrow, they ablate the bone marrow, like they take the cells out of the bone marrow, they I think do an ablation, and they put it back in. That's edited. Maybe
so they
incorrect, but it's definitely like the person's own cells that have been edited and then reintroduced into the body.
but they're editing one of the subunits of hemoglobin. They're not just activating. They're using CRISPR. In other words, they're not just activating the old fetal hemoglobin subunit that was previously turned off. They're actually splicing out a piece of DNA and putting in a new piece or whatever it is that CRISPR is
Yeah,
doing.
so there's the splicing going on, but they're because I initially thought like they're splicing it, removing because it's really just like I think one codon that is changed, or even like one nucleotide. I thought they were just splicing that out and putting a new one in, but that may
Gotcha.
happen eventually, but right now it's the the editing that's done actually just introduces function for fetal hemoglobin.
Gotcha.
And it, I mean, it's showing signs that it works. And theoretically, I think we're still in the early stages. Because I mean, imagine just eradicating sickle cell from, because it's doable with like the same, similar to like cystic fibrosis, I think will be a good target, because I'm highlighting these diseases because these are very clear errors into the very small errors. Small meaning it's one gene, one gene has a problem at one spot, and you can fix that spot, the disease goes away. So
Right.
from that point, it's very.
But that seems like, so yeah, that's why I think intervening, even if it's not intervening at the fetal stage or at the embryo stage of, having beautiful children, but these types of these types of kind of single gene, more or less single gene mutations, or even, single base pair, whatever it may be, it's a lot easier to intervene. For the case of cystic fibrosis, like I don't know how you do that as a that technology wouldn't work as a child, right? When you're already fully formed, you can't deliver it to every single cell of the.
Well, so that's where viruses are really good. So
But they haven't developed. Like, that's like the. I mean, yeah, they
they
talked about
haven't.
the virus.
It's a theoretical thing. You're correct. But at least in theory, viruses should be able to infect a lot of the cells in an adult, and they should have this. They should be able to affect a lot of because when a virus is affected, they affect one cell, they hijack the machinery, replicate, and then they go into another cell. It's just compounds, and then each of the viruses will go into a cell and create millions and billions of copies, and then so in the meantime, your immune system is trying to fight it and fight it, and the immune system is also really good. So I'm sure when you're doing this splicing and stuff, you have to worry about the immune system. Either you add signal, the immune system ignores it, or you have to like shut down the immune system, which will have its own risks, temporarily at least. So it's a
Right.
complicated problem. In theory, it should work. I think medicine is also slow, even if we have a good idea, like Ozempic stuff. I mean, that came out in the 90s originally, but you can't push medicine at the same rate as Apple can push an iPhone, or Nvidia can push its chips,
Right.
and for good reasons, because I think breaking things can have a lot of bad consequence. So yeah, so I think if our goal is to live long and healthy life, and if genes are a big part of that, then it's silly to ignore genes. And I think there's enough interest because a lot of rich people who have the money are realizing, you know, maybe they want to continue living a rich and healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, sure.
And they're like, what am I going to do with this? Granted, a lot of rich people may actually be, sad and depressed because, especially if they fall victim to loneliness and don't have a community, become
Right.
isolated. But if that's not the case, then, I'm sure they'll think about putting their money into these kind of things. And just like free market has a lot of interest because if a company, even like tech company or pharma company, creates a product like this, a therapy like this, I mean, they can, you know, commercially, I can see why rich people would want to spend a lot of money to get some benefit. So overall, I think I'm curious about this future. It'll be interesting. It'll be great if we can actually help avoid some of the diseases that I would have thought we would have already solved.
Right.
So,
Right.
so we'll see.
Well, we got off topic there, but I think that's what this is all about, is
Yeah,
finding pieces.
it's about all about a journey and having a good time and like trying to synthesize different aspects of like I've been listening to too much AI content, so I think my brain's trying to inject AI into every idea, just like a virus, on the CRISPR side. Okay. Okay, let's move on. So I think summary from Centenarians: genes are important. Future will be interesting. What are possibilities there? Diet, generally healthy diet. I don't think we can make strong claims of eating avocado with sesame seeds is the cure for everything. Just eat healthy, avoid obvious things, and have a good community and incorporate movement in your life. And we can talk about exercise more later, but
Well,
that
I
that
think
seems
he
to
like
be.
he like uses that. I think he uses this chapter as a dashboard into his and the behaviors that we're going to do, right? The eating, the exercise,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
as his next chapters, he uses
that's
it to
true.
kind of say,
Yeah,
yeah,
the next chapter is eat less, live longer: the science of hunger and health. Do you remember anything from that chapter?
Well, so starts off with him talking about the pilgrimage to Easter Island and to pay homage to the discovery of rapamycin, this
Oh, that was this
molecule.
chapter? Okay.
Yeah. So this molecule rapamycin that was it's a big thing now, right? You see articles in the papers about it, but this fungus produced it as an antibacterial, or say antifungal, I guess, or as a molecule to help protect itself. And this scientist discovered it, almost had it destroyed when his lab got closed, but he illegally kept a sample.
Like by the
Uh,
volcano or something? Is that right?
what is it?
Oh no, it was like a commercial failure of the lab, or like some lab was getting shut down or something. Like funding was being cut, but he kept
Right.
some of the samples and open arrival.
And then, I think yeah, he went to some other company and they were like, "Do you have any projects
Oh,
that that
yeah.
you're working on?" And he's like, "Actually, I do have one." So, opens the jar that was almost opened. It was like in his freezer and almost opened by his son at one point or something like this. Anyways, the interesting piece about the rapamycin that he states, and I find it very interesting too, is that it affects this molecule called mTOR, or mechanistic target of rapamycin is what it's named after. But it inhibits mTOR, right? So that cross that mTOR, and I guess I guess mTOR is conserved. What mTOR does and downstream effects of activating or inactivating mTOR is conserved across millions and millions, or I don't know, millions, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, in multiple animals, organisms, bacteria, or yeast. And animals, us, have this, have mTOR, and it's interesting. I mean, just that in itself, right? Like, what are the things they mention? I don't know. They say, and not in the book, but he talked when he's talking to the people, David Sabatini or whoever it is, these people that are into rapamycin. Like, what can you think of another molecule that is conserved like that? And they can't really think of one.
Cross
Um,
species.
and I don't know if that's. I mean, that can't be. I don't know how focused that is, because obviously there are molecules that we have that multiple lineages have, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that would be hard for me to think. First of all, like I had never heard of rapamycin in this setting. I mean, I think we use rapamycin like drugs and to kill the immune system or reduce the immune system effects, especially in patients who have liver transplants, kidney transplants, just so the body doesn't attack that foreign organ. Uh, and I think he talks, but here he's talking about taking mTOR or taking rapamycin can help you live a long time, presumably affecting some of the interacting with some of the genes that lead to longevity in people who are born in those families. But I had never heard about the longevity effects of rapamycin, so I am a little skeptical. But doing a Google search sounds like other people there's definitely a following, and I think he talks about the way it's dosed. I think like a steady dose causes immunosuppression, but like a pulse dose can cause uh, longevity, which I mean that kind of concept of a pulse dosing versus a steady dosing having opposite effects. It makes sense just from physiological point of view, just because it's all about your body likes equilibrium states, and it likes like a thermostat that is um, set at whatever the threshold is. So if you continue to introduce a molecule of rapamycin, um, and which will probably bind to a receptor, and at the end, the receptor, your body will learned that it's being tricked and will probably create more receptors to compensate for this drug that's trying to shut down the receptor. So at the end, you may reach the same or similar, close to function. Uh, but if you change, if you play with the dosing and you become unpredictable, then the body may not be able to have that kind of a compensatory. So that at least theoretically, I can understand why different dosing regimens will have these kind of things. But it's interesting. I mean, I've heard since listen to him talk about rapamycin. I think he talks about he takes rapamycin too, just for the health benefits. I don't think I'm convinced enough to even someone gives it to me for free that I will start taking rapamycin just yet. I think there are, at least in my life, there are a lot of lower hanging fruits. I think I can probably move more, use more stairs, exercise, meditate, hang out with friends more. And then if I've done all that, then maybe I can look into this. But it's hard for me to recommend rapamycin to other people, knowing what little I know about it, personally speaking.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because he's a little older than us.
Yeah.
The people that I hear taking it or tend to be a little older. I think the risk benefit becomes a little bit, once you start getting older, you're like, well,
You have to deal with the mortality maybe more closely. And
like, yeah, I can take this risk. And so yeah, at the doses so interestingly, it's an immunosuppressant, right? At the doses that they give for transplant patients and the frequency. But there have been studies that show at the more lower dose setting that you can have a beneficial effect on the immune system. And they done with the vaccination, they've done these with the flu vaccine, I think, and people who are taking it in this way actually had a more robust immune response from the vaccine or something along these lines. I don't
people who were taking rapamycin for longevity purpose got the vaccine.
no, it was purely to see what it would do to the like it was a studies for like a certain dose of rapamycin to give into these people are not and
Okay. But the
everybody
pulsatile method of taking rapamycin with a standard vaccine had a more favorable response to the vaccine because it turned up the immune system.
right. Yeah, they were able to. I guess they measured antibody levels and things like that. Again, I haven't read these studies,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but they always thought that because the people do like one side effect of rapamycin is you get cold sores, um, and that seems to be related to the immune system, like a dampening of the immune system. So, but these studies indicate that, and I don't know again the dose regimen. I don't know the specifics of this, but it's interesting that they had a more robust immune response. So you can't just say across the board that it's an immunosuppressant if you're seeing that response in certain dosing regimens. Um, and then I guess the link here is like in mice models, there have been studies that show that fasting can increase the mouse lifespan, and in the laboratory setting, right? And mice that are not exposed to the world that we're exposed to. And so there's a guy, and I forget his name, but he's and I think so mTOR um, is it seems to be activated by an environment where food is plentiful, whereas it becomes suppressed in an environment where their food is scarce. And so that's it. That's the relation to fasting. And so is is there something there between in fasting and the mTOR effect? And that's what I think what they're trying to get at. Can you manipulate mTOR via rapamycin to get the beneficial effects that are seen in those types of mouse studies where they're being fasted. And I think even Attia will say on his podcast, he's probably said like, there's no real proof that this works. I believe in it and I'm going to
Yeah, yeah.
try it. Right. Yeah. So,
I mean, I'm
um,
glad there are people like that who, is, who's tried things and out of their like voluntary and at least there's some evidence we can actually follow them, in this kind of way and try to see how their life is different. If only a lot of people did this kind of thing. Similarly, I think, unrelated, but I kind of think with the COVID that a lot of people didn't get the vaccine, and some people, a lot of people got the vaccine. Kind of, we never had to design a double-blind study for COVID vaccines, how well they work. But I feel like the world like created incredible study purely out of like people's people's opinions of what's going to happen, what they want to do, and we got this, beautiful possible data where we can see, like how much of this was actually helpful in hindsight and how much was.
do you have any
Uh,
insight into that? I don't get to, I don't
I
like,
mean, right now I think my only insight would be of the people that did not die. Because it's hard, because a lot of people died in the first 2 years, globally
right.
speaking. Of the people that did not die, it appears that the vaccine didn't really save lives. I think it definitely reduced hospitalizations, but it's hard for me to think it saved a lot of lives of young people. I think it probably spared a lot of older people um, who would have gotten exposed, and I think it slowed down the spread. Because I think and it's hard to prove any of this, but I think because I know how quickly it was spreading before the vaccine, and I think after the vaccine, even because a lot of people didn't care about the travel restrictions, right? So I think the fact that a lot of the world, at least in America, was vaccinated, at least 50%, roughly speaking, were. I think the spread slowed down significantly, and I think US is not as there are a lot of confounders, right? Like US is not like an Asian city where there are like thousands of people living in one building sharing, centralized air conditioning and water supply. So it's hard from that standpoint because America is more sparsely populated. But I've been hearing stories of, what happened in New York and Italy and, China, India, like heavily populated countries where the death counts were underreported, if anything,
Mm.
is scary. And
Yeah.
pandemics should be scary. And the lesson should not be, well, like we are resilient, we won't die. I mean, this happened to be milder than what could have been. It should terrify us that the right virus can come along. Just one little. I mean, and what is a virus? I mean, it's just people argue if it's even alive. It's just kind of like a nanobot that happens to infect the cells, and tricks the cells into making more of its copies, and then exits out of the cell and then goes affect something else. That's all it is. I mean, you can
Right.
argue that's what any animal is. What are humans? We get born, we reproduce, and then we die. But I mean, there's really not logic to a virus. It doesn't have any of its machinery. It's kind of like a parasite in that sense. It needs a host to make its protein, and then one virus can come along and in today's globalized world just wipe out. It's I think it's terrifying to a degree of like a nuclear event, of where different nation states are just angry at each other can be detrimental to humanity. We can probably survive, but it takes one. I mean, that's the scary part. Like,
Right.
it takes one.
Yeah.
So I was like, I think people like if when February 2020, if we had vaccines then and everybody took it, I think we probably could have saved a lot more people. It, but I'm impressed the vaccine still came out incredibly fast. I mean, within a year, using this mRNA type, and a similar
Mhm.
thing. I think they instead of testing, I think there was an aspect of we know what the virus looks like. We can design. I mean, there's a lot of reasoning and I think testing in mice, but I think the process to get to a minimum viable product was much shortened because of the way they could just design the mRNA. It's easy to design the mRNA than take the mRNA and try to get the protein and then try to use the protein. I think
Right.
that was my takeaway that you don't have to worry about the protein. You can do what virus is doing. It just carries around the mRNA, a virus, and goes into a cell, feeds its mRNA into the cell, and the cell uses that to make the right protein that makes more viruses and mRNA, and that's kind of what we're doing. We just inject mRNA, let the cells kind of take that up and learn and make protein, and then in human body, the protein its role is to serve as a signal for the immune system to learn. Oh, this is weird, and I need to fight this protein.
Right.
So I think that as society and capitalism, that we use all these forces to cut down our response time to a random pandemic from like identifying, sequencing, and even the 9 months it took. I think it took us like 2 3 months to come up with the mRNA. A lot of the delay was still retesting. Like, is
Right.
it safe? Are we going to kill people with this?
Right.
So I was super impressed that we were able to come up with the vaccine, and it makes me now I think after this that humanity is more resilient. That if something crazy virus comes, perhaps we will be able to respond quickly, even in a hyper globalized world. And I'm sure at that time half the people will take the the vaccine, other half won't. And I think it'll probably also depend if you know people who have died, if you work in healthcare. I mean that's I mean we're human, like we make emotional decisions from experiences, and it's hard to trust sometimes, like what your community is doing is what you will do.
Yeah, I guess I have two observations. I guess I do have insight into this. Like, I mean, I was in training while this happened, and our hospital was like in the news.
Were you in the United States at that time?
Yeah, yeah, I was in El Paso.
Oh, you know that's okay, okay,
Yeah, I was in residency. I mean, so our hospital became nationally known at one point for having an outbreak.
okay,
And we
okay.
converted multiple units to COVID units, and we were basically, I'm a surgeon, so like our surgeries came to a halt, like collective surgeries, and we became this chest tube team essentially, other than emergency surgery. So like I remember it being as like one of the most scary times ever. Like there was just like, and I was in El Paso, it's not the healthiest city in the world, right? So like,
A lot of like will be metabolic syndrome type patients, and
yes, and just I remember like our whole endoscopy unit turned into a COVID unit, and we would get called page after page of like, this patient needs a chest tube, this patient needs a chest tube, this patient's coding, right? So there's a code, you go up, I walk into the room, I get gowned, gloved, all the things. And I vividly remember these times. I would walk into these rooms with chest tube kit ready to put in a chest tube, and like there's 20 patients all around me, all on ventilators, doing very poorly. One's coding. I've got to go over there and put in a chest tube. While I'm doing that, somebody else starts coding, and just like this is on repeat every day, like going on. And I'm just thinking, like, there's no way in hell I'm not being exposed to.
yeah,
I'm doing the appropriate things, but like I'm getting exposed to this. And what's going to happen to me, right? Um, And I guess, and another experience there was like one of my co-residents texted me one day and was like, "Hey, can you check on my cousin who's like in his 20s, bigger guy? Um, he's in the COVID unit." So I walked by his room. He's on high flow cannula, but he's texting in his phone. I'm like, "Oh, he's on high flow, but he's looks like he's doing okay." At the end of that day, he coded and died. And I was like, this is a guy, he was probably not the healthiest person, but he was in his 20s. I'm like, anybody who tells me, like, I have anybody who says that this wasn't a real thing just has no clue. They weren't ever a part of any type of, people want to make claims about the severity of this thing, or like, what should we be masking or not masking and all that stuff. And who knows, everybody was just kind of trying to be the best they could be at the time. But there's a lot of people, and not to go on a soapbox, but there's a lot of people out there that are like question what the government did and the reaction. But like, it was real. Like, it was very scary. And a lot of people in our hospital died despite trying to do the right thing, right? Um, the other thing I just thought of was like, while you were talking, was like, what if, and this is a totally just making this up, but like, we're talking about AI and genetic engineering, and what if you could take this, if you can have models, AI models, to see how a vaccine, or say a virus, is going to, what it's going to, the effects it's going to cause on the human body. Can you create models to fight that, right? Can you use AI to figure out how to get resistance to that? And then the same AI models can figure out how to go around that fix, right? Like,
Like
you
how
know,
the virus might mutate, kind of predict the next step. It's like trying to flee into a game of chess. Like
or
what will
just,
we
or
do? What will the virus do?
I think of computer viruses. It's like you try to infect a computer, you have people that are trying to find those and get them out of the system, but then you have hackers that figure out ways around those fixes, right? Like, is this what is this one direction that AI will take with bio terrorism, like something like this? It
So
seems
I
kind
think
of
the
crazy.
easiest, I think figuring out, because we talk about conversation, like conserved sequences and the pathways that exist not just from human to human, but there's some so hard coded that plants and animals and humans have the same proteins and the structures. I mean, the DNA of the plant is very similar building blocks to a human, right? I mean, it's the same kind of nucleotide. Uh, so I think there those kind of things I feel like are much easier problem. Trying to figure out what has evolution has conserved over billions of generations, and trying to figure out what this new virus will do is a little bit harder. I think it's still doable because you just have to, because you don't have a lot of data to support what will happen. But I think
Right.
once you start going like, hey, like the COVID-19, I mean, you could probably test it by introducing all the different coronaviruses that can infect, are able to infect, and then once you have that, uh, a standard environment of a virus of that kind of uh, composition infected a human, then I think from that it becomes easier to, okay, what if the virus is similar to this kind of virus, or the virus is closer to a herpes virus? I think if you feed those, I think it's doable. But then
Yeah.
to predict,
Patterns.
what will be the second and third degree consequences, I'm sure people will. Maybe it's easier or harder. I would think it gets much harder to. But there's a lot of randomness too. Like I don't know, like who's going to, um, you know, who's going to react and why, and how many pandemics will it take it to capture? Because we didn't really collect a lot of good data for AI purposes in this last pandemic, and pandemics happen every 50 to 100 years. So I don't
Right.
know, like, how are we gonna be able to? But I'm sure there's a way. I think if the computer simulations get really really strong, I think NVIDIA is trying to model Earth now for for weather prediction. NVIDIA is gonna create all of Earth and atmosphere in a computer,
Uh,
and try to do. The goal is to do a much better job of weather prediction. If
uh,
if they can, because to me that is a very complex problem with a lot of
right.
variables that, but if they can crack the code there, that tells me, we are capable for a lot more things than we were 50 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
interesting.
interesting. But yeah, I mean the COVID, I mean it was definitely one of the scariest time. I mean even PPE. I mean, it's kind of unrelated, but I remember in I think residency before COVID, I think I used to get uh looks for like wearing the same mask from one flu patient's room to another one. People was like, "Don't do that, don't do that. It's against the rule and policy." And COVID came, and you're using the same mask for 6 months. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's scary, scary part, scary times, and the uncertainty. I think it's very much like what people feel. I know I've never felt what war would feel like. I'm sure it feels, because
Right.
there's a lot of uncertainty. People are dying. You have a sense of increased duty because now working. You're all. I mean, in healthcare, you always have a sense of duty, but here, I think a lot of people who came to the hospital in healthcare, I think everybody finally felt, admin people, doctor, everybody felt they're in the same team, not necessarily fighting each other, but fighting the virus. But I thought
Right.
that was a beautiful. It brought a lot of people in healthcare, together.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But
Uh,
I guess after after the vaccine was introduced, I have to say, at some point in my training, I was in the, so I was in my fourth year when it kind of got big, and then into my chief year, and like it was it was less. We stopped. And I guess that was at the time when the pandemic, in general, was kind of dying down. But I wonder if how much the vaccines had to do with that. But um, well, the
Carson.
idea. So going back to go back to fasting. Um, I think about this now on almost a daily basis because they're basically saying when food is available, mTOR is activated, and you get like you're basically getting a series. This mTOR molecule is like a general contractor, right? Like when activated, it's kind of involved in protein synthesis and anabolism, or excuse me, catabolism, no, anabolism, sorry, anabolism, and cell division, all this stuff. Whereas when it's inhibited, you get this more, you get it kind of a recycling, a garbage truck type scenario where you're scavenging materials to use somewhere else, protein breakdown, cell autophagy, all these things that potentially could be beneficial, clearing out cellular debris. If you think about like Alzheimer's and these, whatever, beta amyloid or tau, whatever it may be, like, so is there a role for, so when I think, like, when I wake up in the morning, I think personally, I'm trying to like build muscle. I think it's important is we would get to that later chapters about diet, but to me, I think having adequate muscle on your body for both oxygen utilization and just for stability and strength as you age is important. I haven't personally been able to build muscle very well, probably because I just haven't been taking the right strategies. But when I wake up, I try to have a good breakfast. I try to get this protein synthesis. I try to, in my mind, activate mTOR, right? I'm trying to, yeah, build muscle, build cells, through that and through like resistance training, right? Or like trying to time my meals around at the right times and doing my workouts at the right times to get that benefit. I don't know how I don't really know how well I'm how scientific it is, you know. I have any proof that it's working, but
Have you tried steroids?
that's my next step. Yeah. Um, but I think it's interesting. Like, if you were to include it in that regimen, if you were to take rapamycin to more deliberately suppress mTOR at certain times, would that be beneficial? I don't know.
So I think the problem with that line of kind of reasoning is, in my opinion, like I mean, mTOR is involved with a lot of things, right? I mean, growth, metabolism, um, protein translation, and probably autophagy, which is kind of like waste management of the body, which is like a lot. And the problem is mTOR is one type of a pathway. I mean, it's a type of protein kinase. I think there are a lot. There are probably like thousands and thousands of parallel pathways that are involved in regulation of these complicated processes within the body. And we don't understand exactly how they interact with each other. How does one protein kinase like mTOR react with another one? There's so many signaling pathways, and all the signaling pathways accomplish one vague goal, which is to change the protein concentration within the cell. I'm not talking about which protein, it could be any
Right,
protein, but they're all
right.
trying to affect, at the end,
Translation,
protein
essentially.
function change, translation. Oftentimes that happens, I mean, I took biology in college, and I mean, my brain was always like, a lot of these things actually change. Which genes are turned, on, which are off. And sometimes you don't have to go to the gene. You can just create something and you can just go directly and stop the protein. And we talk about steroids. Steroids do the same things most of the time. I think like testosterone and estrogen, they actually go directly. They're very small molecules. Um, Oftentimes they can just go through the cell membrane into the nucleolus and directly change transcription. They're signaling molecules. And obviously, we know like healthcare, like steroids have uh, people use them for muscle hypertrophy, but obviously they have all these other side effects. And I'm sure people who work out and want to look big, and they're not necessarily worried about. I think they're more worried about looking like big muscle, as opposed to how much can I lift, and how powerful, like how strong I am necessarily. But I'm sure if they were given a pill that isolated the muscle hypertrophy without any of the other side effects, they will completely jump on it. They choose steroids because that's the only thing that is available that they know of works, and they accept other side effects. So I guess the big point is all the signaling molecules are still like trying to use a rocket launcher where you should be using snipers. You know a problem. In ideal world, we'll just focus on that as opposed to just blowing something up with the rocket launcher or grenade. You know, uh, so I think eventually, I think we just need a lot of data, a lot of research in all of these signaling molecules, because it's part of how we understand how the body will work and function and react. different stresses. And that would mean trying to study all the signaling molecules under fasting conditions, under intermittent fasting conditions, the different diets. I mean, insulin is a huge molecule that's part of all the same things like cell growth, metabolism. It reacts to environmental inputs, food. I think, and we're realizing with kind of Ozempic type stuff. I mean, there's also overlap of just dopamine and food, and when you shut, these cravings down, that they're even second order effects when people are stopping alcohol with when they're on Ozempic at times. Uh, so I think it's a lot more complicated, and I think if I were talking to patients who were interested in these things, my advice will be what we know, what builds hypertrophy of muscle is muscle usage. I know that for sure, and I can tell you that doesn't have a lot of side effects. So, and it's
Right.
right, and it's not it's the hardest way of going about it, and you have to be okay with the ceiling. You have to succumb to what your body is capable of. But if you want to do the healthiest thing, that is it. Everything else, you're trying to take a shortcut that is not as well informed as you may want to. Um, and then, I mean, you can try to, and there may be easier way without taking things, maybe uh, going back, stimulating starvation states. Maybe that makes you, you know, intermittent fasting even. Maybe I would think it triggers more stamina. Maybe trying to make parallels of like a, a old ancestor who has to forage for food, and that requires a lot of focus and stamina. And I would think starvation should mean you get not prolonged starvation, but periods of starvation should make you focus and give you energy. And the evolutionary purpose will be that serves the purpose of for your ability to gather food. And that may mean hunting down an animal or gathering things and seeing food better. So, that would be my strategy, and maybe I'll do that one day. But um, I don't know. I hope there's more data comes out. If rapamycin type drugs do help, if it's just as easy as taking a pill, and you can work out and have kind of accelerated positive benefits without any of the negative ones, and we are very certain about that. I mean, that'd be huge. And there's a reason rapamycin hasn't blown up as much as Ozempic, because I mean, I don't have any sponsorship with Novo Nordisk, but I think these kind of GLP-1 agonists are that, where you see a lot of these positives. You see some negatives, but positive from a population health view, where you're seeing you know, a lot of emotional and financial burden from obesity and metabolic syndrome and diabetes. When you see that world and you sprinkle, you introduce these kind of drugs, I mean, the amount of harm you can prevent and reduce is incredible. And so far, I think we're going to continue, but like I said, these molecules came out 20, 30 years ago, but the downside seems to be limited. Some people get nauseous, so we kind of know why. Pancreatitis is a risk, which, once you get that, you shouldn't be taking these drugs anymore. So that's the level of conviction I think I would need to see before I start prescribing it. And I think pharma companies, once they realize, they see the potential too, right? They have to market these drugs. So if they saw a lot of potential in rapamycin in positive metabolic syndrome, positive metabolic changes, I would think they have a huge incentive of marketing it that way, and it will slow down.
So there's so for one, so yeah, rapamycin I guess would be the exogenous molecule, but so mTOR is intracellular, right? So it's not endocrine. There's not endocrine function there. It's intracellular. So as
Well,
compared to like
it is, but
insulin.
I'm saying endocrine molecules often work via these type of signaling molecules.
All right, but so I don't think rapamycin. If I had to guess, what's going to happen there? So there's going to be a study they're doing on companion dogs with rapamycin, and that's important. They're taking basically healthy companion dogs and more or less splitting up into receiving or not receiving rapamycin and seeing if it has an effect on longevity, right? So you can't doing this study in humans is not going to work because we're trying to measure longevity as opposed to weight loss or as opposed to diabetes, which are studyable, but longevity is not studyable in humans.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
not ever going to be funded, and it's not a realistic study. So
yeah,
right, so that's one reason why big pharma is not going after it, because it's hard to study this. And so the dog trial will be informative if because they're living in our environment, they're eating more or less kind of similar foods, and they're evolutionarily not too far off. So like, um, it'll be interesting to see if you see a change in lifespan there, but I don't
I
think
guess,
it's going to be rapamycin that gets approved. I think there's going to be that, just like most drugs, right? It's something you find in the environment and then you modify it in some way for most of
yeah,
these
yeah,
drugs. So it'll probably be some, and they already have them, right? Sirolimus.
yes,
Um,
relevant, yeah.
so there are, or everolimus, like there are already modifications of this drug. So it's probably going to be something like that. That's
And
going to
oftentimes
be studied.
oftentimes when a drug is promising, and they will, to your point, what is studied is the shortest, the benefit that can be measured quickly. Like for GLP-1s, even though they have this huge metabolic uh, benefit, especially people with metabolic syndrome, all the initial studies for 10, 20 years were diabetes focused and reducing A1C because you can measure that in 3 months.
Right.
So I think the product cycling makes sense from that point of view. Once you get approved, then you can try to explore. But I don't think rapamycin necessarily is, I think the shortest thing. I mean, they say it helps with cellular metabolism, catabolism, and immune responses. Um, so I think to study it, I think the right thing would be to figure out what is the shortest thing. It's going to be, you can measure, does it reduce cancer? Um, so I think ultimately, 'cause
But it,
to,
if they could prove this, if they can show this autophagy thing, that may be one thing. I don't know, like or as far as like clearing out intracellular debris, if that's one of the claims
but that
that
can be
it
good or bad. I mean, sometimes, I mean, you're talking about, yeah, like, I mean, autophagy is a great function, but you also, if you turn it up too much and you start killing things you're not supposed to kill, that can have, you know, problems, and they may not show up for decades if you start, instead of clearing the necessary things that need to be killed, if you start killing things you shouldn't be killing because you over, and immune system stuff
well
always makes me nervous if you think this like turns up the immune system, and because I mean autoimmune diseases are a thing, and this is how, I guess I'm thinking in a very uh, high level stuff because I haven't studied it deeply in terms of what it can do and can't do.
yeah, I mean, I think that's where the studies will come into play, right? So
Yeah.
um they mention in the book that impaired autophagy is a mechanism of aging. It could be a mechanism of aging. That we're just not performing that function as well as we age. And so if you can manipulate that, so I think it gets to the I think it gets to the crux of like what is aging and why do we age and what are the processes going on as we age. You know, it was always a famous one was just like telomere length stuff that we like that was
Yeah.
like from what when I was back studying in college, right? But like
Correct.
more stuff is known now, and so if they find evidence that impaired autophagy is one thing that happens as we age, then can you so they mentioned that rapamycin and caloric restriction both increase autophagy. So again, like, is there a not just with rapamycin, but if you take fasting or some sort of caloric restriction implementation, are you able to see a difference in some I don't know how they measure that, whether that be like how do they measure the in Alzheimer's disease, the buildup of the tau tangles or the amyloid? Like what are they using MRI, diffusion weighted imaging, or what are they using to measure that other than just autopsies? Like what are they using to see a difference? I think it's MRI. Um, but can you see that with these interventions? Can you measure that? If you can do that, then you could I would feel like within a reasonable amount of time, a reasonable study time, a year or less, with these interventions, you could see a difference,
So
I would
you're
imagine.
hypothesizing using a proxy of some deposition that, I mean, MRIs are very strong. I mean, MRIs can detect signals from individual hydrogen atoms. So if the change is significant enough that it can be picked up on MRI as a proxy, we'll still have to decide if that change actually means someone living in humans long time, because and human span is like 100 years. So it's kind of unreasonable unless we do a highly
Well, it
sophisticated
doesn't have to be
simulation,
lifespan. It can be development of Alzheimer's, or it can be something like
something like that. Yeah.
people who have or development of mild cognitive impairment or whatever you want to study. If
We
you're
could
just
even
talking
sign
about
up. We can sign up people in their 60s, to kind of shorten, like, like what does that have when you give a 60, 1,060-year-olds in a study and 500 of them get it and another don't and everything else is the same. And
right,
that's a manageable study over 10, 20 years.
and if you, I just don't know how they, other than with just screening questionnaires, like how do they measure with imaging? With what accuracy are they measuring the buildup of this cellular debris, as we like to call it, or like they think potentially, and they, if the autophagy process, I don't know enough about it. If part of that is clearing out, because I do
So,
think there is something to sleep and clearing out cellular debris,
so I
right?
mean, you can use. I mean, so I think it's called Mendelian. I think study. What is the term that you
Mammalian
say?
randomization.
Yeah, randomization, which is, I the way I understand is you don't have to worry about a lot of randomization, but you just look at existing populations. So I mean, you can look at, assuming caffeine disrupts sleep. You could, or you could just look at people who self-report they sleep a lot versus they don't. Uh, Either way, I mean, and you could study that today. Just like cross-sectional study. Again, look maybe later years, 60-year-old or so, people who don't do any caffeine for whatever reason, maybe cultural reasons, who knows? I think there are subsects of Christianity that shun caffeine completely. And I mean, study them just to, I mean, I think there are confounders, like maybe they're genetically more similar or different than the rest of the population because cultural reasons. But if you can isolate just the caffeine part and study, um, somebody who, you know, comes from a heavy coffee culture, I don't know, some Italian village, and
Right.
see if they're, like that. I mean, you can try to find signal through these kind of things where you just need. So if the cost of MRI is very low
Yeah.
and cost of compute from AI is very low, I mean, technically a lot of people can play around with these kind of data.
Yeah.
Though I've never heard of MRIs being used for these kind of things, try to look at cellular differences. I've only seen biopsies,
Well, I was
but
at I was at the University of Pennsylvania. There was this I took a class, neurodegenerative disease. It was about, I think it was all about neurodegenerative disease. I think that's all it was about. There was robust research being done there at that time. I don't know if they're still there. I know there was a lab run by Trojanowski and Lee. These two, they were kind of heavyweights in the Alzheimer's. And there was a thing called the Alzheimer's Disease Neuro Initiative, ADNI, at that time, a collaboration between multiple universities to see Alzheimer's disease, neurodegenerative, what is it? I thought it had imaging. I thought there was like there was an imaging component. Whatever it was like,
was it John Q. Trojanowski?
yeah,
But he passed away
really.
2 years ago.
Well, he had a lab with this lady named Lee. Um, I forget her first name,
So you
but
got the
they
name,
were, huh?
you got the name right. Yeah, it's neurodegenerative disorder lab at UPenn.
Um, but there was multiple universities, like Michigan, I think was one of them. Several universities around the country that were trying to take people and use diffusion weighted imaging, MRI, to see if you could diagnose somebody with mild cognitive impairment to try to intervene earlier, I think.
Actually, so I have done similar. I've been part of similar studies where you're trying to do the same thing, um, like sports related injuries, football and impact injuries. So
uh,
I think there are a lot of research going in these kind of things. There's a lot of funding. I mean, there has to be a signal, and MRI is a very harmless way of trying to study it. So I think it's a reasonable bet that something somewhere will find um, these kind of answers of breakdown of the brain essentially. And sleep is the other part. It's such a mysterious part that it's hilarious. We still don't really understand how sleep works and why it works and why it's needed and why everybody must sleep and be
right,
vulnerable for 8 hours. It has been
right.
for like billions of years. And it's just
And
ridiculous.
all animals do it, right? I mean, all animals have this, whether it's, I know they, even sharks, like, well,
Yeah.
they have some level of like rest where they're just like zoned out. So
And
it's
animals
interesting.
will go through, I mean, ridiculous hoops to not get eaten, like mimic poisonous, looking
Right.
organisms and but nobody's able to crack sleep. I guess I think maybe dolphin or sharks, like they sleep like half brain at a time or something. I don't even know if that's true. But the point is, you know, and I wonder if as they try to model AI closer and closer to the human brain, if they'll reach a point where the AI has to like sleep for 8 hours. They're like, we don't know why, but it just accuracy is just better when we shut it down for like 8 hours a day. I think that would
Then then we'll know for sure that
be hilarious.
it's important. Yeah, this thing, Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, is a public-private partnership to develop a multi-site longitudinal prospective naturalistic study of normal cognitive aging, MCI, and early Alzheimer's disease. Um, to facilitate the scientific evaluation of neuroimaging and other biomarkers for the onset of and progression of MCI and Alzheimer's disease. That's out of the National Institutes of Aging. I don't know where there's a few YouTube videos on it, but I don't know whatever came of that, if anything. But I think it's, if there's something there, if you can measure it via imaging, then you could
I mean,
potentially,
you
with
can
some,
like imaging can tell you if somebody has Alzheimer's, especially advanced Alzheimer's. So the question is, can we detect the pre version of that?
But they're just detecting like loss of brain matter, right? Not
Yeah, I
necessarily.
think they are. They are detecting loss of brain matter. But
I don't. Yeah, if they can see the protein conglomeration. Who knows? That's not even a definitive known cause of Alzheimer's, but implicated potentially.
also, people who have
Um,
strong family history of Alzheimer's, and if you start just scanning them just to create
right.
databases of data and to see how that changes and if they get Alzheimer's or not, and then I mean that's pretty. I mean, ultimately, it is a structural issue, and I think there'd be a lot of meaning in that data.
I think that's what we need to do. That if I could be health czar, I would be I would lower the cost of these machines of like getting a scan. In whatever way that takes place. Everybody gets scans a lot, like especially
Especially
MRI, something that's non-radiate, like no
radiation. Yeah,
radiation.
yeah, yeah.
And like yeah, pancreas, things that we can't like surveil very well, liver, pancreas, and that have good diagnostic value, head, the brain, and then just yearly scans and like or not yearly, but genetic testing on everybody, right? Like get more data there. I think that's what they just need more data. They need more points, right?
And there's very low downside to pursuing this data heavy approach. I mean, the only barrier is cost and
Well, the
I mean, capitalism and competition is the problem, I think. But if you open the markets, I mean, 23andMe, I think they're going bankrupt right now. But
right,
I mean, as a consumer good, I mean, they try to market, and that they're the first people who did it. Now, I think they established consumer-wise there's a need, and what's stopping companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook. Maybe Google says, "Hey, on YouTube, I'll remove ads. Let me sequence your data." I mean, some people will take them up on it, or other countries. I mean, the good thing is humans. That there are a lot of similar similarities between humans of different countries. So, I mean, if you know, there's a risk of exploitation, but if China, India, or Africa were take the spirit of competition and allow for um, you know using the best practices, just beautiful databases of humans. I mean, that'd be a great service for science.
right. I think that obviously a downside is using that information in the wrong way, but
That's the yeah. So I mean, I'm assuming that's taken care of. I mean, with data security, and you don't want to exploit people. But the good
I don't
thing is, I
know.
think it'll be cost will be low. So I think it's doable. But I think America too. I think we'll see because you definitely want strong. I mean, with MRIs, the stronger the magnets, the more expensive the scans. I think because it just requires more electricity. But the cost, like from pure operations point of view, I mean, once you buy the machine, the cost is, I mean, whoever's reading it, and if you imagine a world where the computer is the one reading it, then and then what is your cost? I mean, it's literally just electricity.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah, that would.
I mean, you'll get that scan. You'll volunteer to
Oh,
get your
I would
brain
get the scan.
scanned for humanity. It's like
Well,
getting your blood
like
done.
Attia, I think he gets his patients colonoscopies at 40, barring any family history. Like he starts colonoscopies at 40.
Yeah.
That's what I would. That's I want that. Like I think being able to whatever imaging modality and it's not overly invasive, right? Um, I don't know. I think that's a good idea. Again, more data and starting earlier.
But the problem becomes, even with MRI, right? There's a reason we don't do MRI screenings right now, is the ethical problem of finding things that look abnormal. We don't know what to do with it, and what do you do with it if you find something that could technically be a cancer, maybe 5% chance? Do you tell the patient? Do you do the biopsies?
Right, there
And
would be a
who
lot of
pays
false
for all
positive.
this? Yeah. So
Right.
I think those are the caveats. But I think as we improve things, like maybe we can tell what is cancer and what is not cancer without needing biopsies, and that would cut down on that friction. So I mean, ultimately, I think MRI is such a beautiful tool. It should be able to tell us a lot, especially
Yeah.
if we keep coming up with stronger and stronger magnets and cheaper scans. I would love to, for some reason, colonoscopy seems to be something that you can't image your way out of. Like, the best way to do it is with a camera.
Mhm.
Uh, Maybe they can come up with, it's not just a camera. Like, you need a camera plus um, uh, prep. Like, you need to go through the prep, which is a big
Yeah.
friction for people to do. I mean, there's fit testing, there's cancer's DNA testing, liquid biopsies might be a thing. So, but I
Yeah, I
think the
think
right thing
that's
to
a
do is like target everything, and because cancer is like you can do everything right, and it seems like people get cancer, and it's frustrating. I mean, it's like doctors can justify someone with diabetes, getting on dialysis. To us, it makes sense, and we can make peace with it. But we'll see like young people who have never smoked or doing the right thing and get a random cancer. Like, I think a lot of doctors lose sleep over that, and people worry about that too.
well, it's happening. Younger and younger people are getting colorectal cancer.
Yeah, and we don't know
That's
why.
a that's
Like,
a
and
real thing. Yeah.
we don't know why, and we don't know. It's still not enough. Where we're. I mean, I think medical communities are realizing that's a problem, so that's why I think every 5 years we're realizing the recommended screening is getting lower and lower. Uh, but it's scary to think that's happening because ultimately, like, prevention, right? I mean, screening is a way to catch it early, but it's not prevention. Prevention would be spend all your energy and resources trying to figure out why
Well, yeah,
and
yeah.
eliminate it. Which, I mean, I don't know why. And the internet would have a million different theories pointing in all different directions.
Plastics.
I
I'm gonna
mean,
go with
like,
plastics.
I think that's probably up there in educated, reasonable guesses, or like those like PFAS, kind of forever chemicals. I mean, it's it's probably environment at this point. So you just have to see what has changed in the environment in the last 50 years.
A lot of things, yeah.
A lot of things that
Diet and plastic.
and some
And
chemicals, I guess.
chemicals, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think
I
that
don't
that
know.
if
It's
you're gonna
scary though.
start, yeah, if you're gonna start an expensive project, I think that those are things you'll target. It is scary. It is scary. And for now, people who have the resources to get early screenings, I mean, they will do that because why not?
Right.
And screenings are not that expensive if you don't follow the insurance route. I mean, you can get a private screening for a little bit less than $1,500, which is not. I mean, it's kind of like an iPhone at this point. People pay for iPhones. Like, does that mean you could get, you know, maybe don't upgrade your iPhone every 2 years, do it every 4 years, and get a screening once every 5 to 10 years?
Right. Right.
'Cause it's not, and you're getting, American trained, GI doctors with pathology and anesthesia, everything. So I think cost is may not be a crazy barrier in today's world. If you try to go to the free market route, I think prices are a lot more reasonable than the insurance prices, which may be like, I don't know, 10 grand, 20 grand, and don't make any sense. That's a different topic.
Maybe I need to acquire a mobile truck and GI equipment and
Scope.
offer screening colonoscopies.
But it requires prep. I think
For,
EGDs are still easier, but colonoscopy, unless you create a system where you can do a washout as you're going in.
that's what I always thought during residency. I was like, how can I wash this thing out? I think
Yeah.
if you could develop that, you would completely transform the
Dude,
colonoscopy.
people,
I
you
have an
can't.
idea in my mind,
People
but
will. You know how people get IV fluids? People will get a cleanse. I mean, it will become a trend. People will get a colon cleanse and end up getting a colonoscopy. But then, like,
yeah,
I
you
just,
just do it in the same setting. Like I always thought
yeah.
my idea was to, well, they have like the balloon push enteroscopy. Are you familiar with that? Like
That's to like
they use
move things around, right? If something's stuck, then you kind of go behind it, inflate the balloon, and pull it out. Is that what you're talking about?
no, no, like if you want to get down into the jejunum or
Oh, small
further
bowel.
down,
Yeah, double balloon
yeah,
enteroscopy.
double
Yeah,
balloon,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So they have the scopes, they have the balloons. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this on out loud, but like they there's a there's a mechanism. So if you could have a couple balloons on the scope and you can through that system you could wash out essentially. You could create a pressure
Oh, I
gradient
see.
in like
I see what
water
you're saying.
irrigation. Like you could occlude one side and then flush out from the other kind of thing.
I don't know why you
Uh,
can just like. I mean, if we can, like, why you can't just have a motor, a tiny motor that's just crushing things and sucking them out. Like, push water in, crush, have a little
well,
crusher system, and just pull it out
yeah,
with.
you'd have to have a more robust scope. I mean, when you put it in, like some people don't prep well, right? So if there's any stool left, it becomes very, very difficult to just get even a trace amount of stool.
Hmm,
It's like it doesn't fit. Like larger pieces of stool don't just
won't
like
fit.
dissolve down, or like they won't fit in the scope channel that suctions, and then it dirties up the lens. You're constantly cleaning the lens, irrigating, but it doesn't.
I think that's why I think I've seen setups like that where people can just like flexing. Because I mean, it's kind of a straight shot. You don't have to worry about a lot of
Right.
bends, and I think those you can just go in and out. And
Yeah, if
I
you
don't.
could go in, but getting it, the problem is getting in when the stool's there is dangerous. Like you don't want to just be pushing willy-nilly. You
Yeah,
want to get to the end of the, if you could get to the end of the colon, inflate a balloon and just kind of drag it out and drag all the stool with it.
I guess it'll become very laborious too, which is like, yeah,
Well,
you're saying
yeah,
like
I
go
mean,
all the way to the
yes, yeah,
cecum, inflate a balloon, and just pull, pull,
pull
pull.
out, yeah,
Oh
and
God.
have some sort of like irrigation as you're going along. Like I
Yeah,
think it would
yeah.
work, but the problem is getting to the cecum safely with all the stool there. Like if you didn't prep at all, that would be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, you could probably blow out the colon. Yeah, I can see why. Maybe just do the prep.
I mean, the prep sucks, but it cleans you out.
That cleans you out. I mean, it's
And they
incredible.
do. We always did in residency. We always did we had them start at noon or 2, finish by midnight, and then whatever. But then the split dose, when you're doing it, you're starting it at like 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and doing another dose at like 2 a.m. or whatever it is, 4 a.m. It seems to be easier. Like patients tolerate it just as well, and you don't have to like you don't have to interrupt your entire day. You can be at home for it.
So how does that work? Do you just, I mean, the split dosing, I mean, how you're still drinking a lot of fluid, right?
Yeah, you just start it later in the day, so you're not at work. You don't have to take a day off of work. You do 2 liters initially, and then you do another 2 liters like at 2 through 4 a.m.
'Cause I
Um,
feel like terrified of. I'm sure like it'll change, but sounds stressful to like plan your day out like that. But I can see why people will be hesitant. But I think if it, a lot of people do it, so it's It's probably like a fun challenge because it's not gonna kill you, right? It's gonna make you
Right.
uncomfortable. And maybe part of the lesson here is how do you change your behavior? How do you learn how to exercise and eat better? Being comfortable with mild, uncomfortable scenarios. So
Right.
it's okay. I mean, it's gonna suck. It sucks for everybody. Just do it. Can
Right.
be the lesson there.
I mean, it's a cleanse. You get to clean out your colon at least.
Yeah,
But
yeah. They can brag about it. Maybe they can you can put your photos on social media. I mean, that could be an incentive if we can make that trend going.
look at my colon.
Yeah, clean. Good. I think that's. I think last about it, I can totally see people brag about it on social media. These things trends just start out of nowhere. You have a little
Yeah.
TikTok. The doctor can charge extra for like giving you a reel made ready to go.
That's right. Dude, let's start up a little band.
Or they give you a
Let's get a
discount
couple.
for letting them post it on their social media.
That's right.
That'd be like, and
Make it fun.
yeah, and they get like a recipe, like a repository of all the colons they have done. You know, like the don't like institutions like the boards, whatever, like an entity in the background keeping up with. They have to track where they've done the scopes, anyways. And there you go. They about look at my. If someone comes, hey, have you done scopes? Have you looked at my social media? Oh yeah, it's a lot of scopes. Interesting. Oh, we keep
Well,
getting off topic, but in a really fun manner.
that's all right. Well, maybe we should
They should find us topic points.
yeah.
Okay, let's.
Uh,
Where were we? We're on chapter 5. I think we're still talking about. We've started flirting about food. We haven't. We're flirting about fasting. We haven't talked about all the big diet topics that he
well,
touches and metabolic
yeah, so I
syndrome.
think 5 is fasting, and then 6, I think, goes into metabolic disorders, so then I think it slowly leads into more
Yeah.
diet stuff.
So next
So,
time we'll try to. Yeah, we'll just pick up with diet. Okay. Well,
well,
this
that's
has
just
been.
good because actually we initially were trying to do metabolic disorders anyway, so
Yeah.
I think we'll have a lot to talk about there.
Interesting. I like this format. Hopefully it doesn't. Somebody finds it helpful.
Nobody's gonna find it interesting, but we'll try to we'll get better over time.
Yeah, we'll get better. And
We'll adapt.
yeah. And it's fun. I mean, it's incredibly fun for me. It's like it's forcing me to be organized, and I enjoy
Right.
our tangents. They're interesting tangents. You're a very smart man. Just I can't believe you're a surgeon.
What was I thinking?
I think you could be a triathlete. You could be a professional athlete.
Uh, because Attia does all his VO2 max stuff, he talks about all that stuff, and like I'm kind of like more in tune. Like most of my life, I've thought, man, I could have done this or that. I feel like I could have done some sport, whatever. And then you like get into the real world and you start hearing the real numbers, and you're like below average, or like average
Yeah,
person,
like
in
people
that
like good,
realm.
excellent people are machines. I mean,
It's
yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
especially athletes. Like I don't know. I guess it's a lifelong thing. I always believe. I mean, I think there are some like people that are genetically probably have better or more capable maybe of having more endurance or whatever it is, strength, whatever
Yeah,
it may be. But like obviously, like play a sport like basketball, like that was my sport in high school. You know, 5'10" white guys, probably low likelihood of making the NBA. But like I feel like in a lot of sports, anybody could become really good. Like you could, like, could I train if I would have started at the age of 15? Because could I be a professional bike rider? I think I could have, but
yeah. To me,
you
that's
have to
not the
have a lot
point.
in place.
And you have to have like like that lifestyle, you should feel a lot of joy and satisfaction. And I think you probably are competitive that way. To me, I mean, if I think my bar for physical activity is much lower than yours. I mean, if I can do what I preach, like average, be active, just show up. If I can regularly
Right.
show up, I think that is a great goal for most
Right.
people,
Absolutely.
especially the people that have a lot to gain from easy things they can do to increase their health. But then the people like you and Atia that are going from like
Don't put me on that level, dude. It's that
from
you said
98 to like 99%, and then be like, oh,
no,
at least that
but
way.
that's you said competitive, and I always thought I'm a pretty competitive person, but no, I'm not. Like that's the difference. I think the people that are ultra competitive
Yeah,
are the ones that, and they take an interest and they become good at some sport. I think
that's
you have
true.
to have that. Like I don't have that. Like I played a lot of sports and I never got. I don't ever remember having the feeling like I'm gonna win this game. I'm gonna beat you. I don't care what I have to do and how, whatever it is, like that
That's
killer
good.
instinct.
Yeah,
I would compete with myself and I would try to become better at what I could do, but that type of competition, I don't think it lends to the high
yeah.
tier,
You're not gonna get world recognition, but you'll get better. I
yeah.
mean, you'll definitely get better over time. Uh, but I mean, it's and that's the thing. Like, unless you're like the top two or three, like, do people care
Who
about
cares?
that top
Who
10? Like,
cares?
I don't. I think you
Right.
went through all this, and then you couldn't be the top one. Like, and now you feel
Right.
terrible.
Right, right. Yeah, that's true. Like all these, yeah.
I mean, think of all the people climb Everest, and now they want to tell people, but nobody cares. Like, sure, but you're not even in the top 10. A lot of people go climb Everest, and that's a hard thing to do.
Right, right.
But
Yeah, I think you have to find intrinsic joy, and that's however that is, whatever level that is for you, and
yeah,
that's
and that's the only sustainable way. I think if your joy comes from bragging rights of I am the best, that's probably you're probably losing points on the psychological stuff of long-term health.
right, right, exactly. Yep.
All right, man. Let me see if
All right.
we can conclude this. It's like if it doesn't record at all.